All right, Chapter 2, Unit 1, Lesson 1, Communication Basics. Communication involves the exchange of messages verbally and non-verbally. Communication methods include spoken or written language, gestures, facial expressions, and body movements. The following diagram demonstrates effective communication. It says to think first, then deliver the message, allow time for understanding, and then assess the response. Think of empathy as a tactic you can use to help the situations you will encounter as a law enforcement officer. Empathy is the ability to understand and care about the emotions of others. Before I go too much deeper, remember that empathy is a tactic where command presence is an officer's most valuable nonverbal tool. So empathy is a tactic, command presence is a tool. Then move on to when you are empathetic, you will think about how that person must be feeling and how you would feel in that same situation. Using empathy to put yourself in another's shoes will also help you employ the 4 pillars of procedural justice. Empathy can mean the difference between escalating into violence or keeping everyone safe and secure. Courtesy is how you display professional conduct or show respect for others. Be personal yet professional by introducing yourself by name and using the person's name to establish rapport. Treat every person you meet with dignity and respect. Avoid words, phrases, and sarcastic tone that could create barriers. Explain what actions you are taking and why. Professionalism is behavior that demonstrates good character and is marked by pride in yourself and career. The characteristics of professionalism include service, integrity, respect, quality, fairness, honesty, courage, compassion, moral and ethical leadership, trustworthiness, and common sense. Some examples of professionalism include doing the right thing when no one's looking, knowing your job and being competent, dressing professionally, maintaining a calm presence, being courteous, having customer service. Another way to maintain professional behavior is to practice the 4 pillars of procedural justice and the LEAD framework in all of your interactions. Again, the LEAD framework is listen, explain, equity, and dignity. Projecting a positive self-image. Command presence, an officer's most valuable nonverbal tool, is your demeanor and confidence exhibited by personal appearance, erect posture, alertness, and attention to surroundings. You can improve your self-confidence, credibility, and command presence through training, education, and experience. So let's compare those real quick. So remember, empathy is a tactic you can use, and it is the ability to understand and care about the emotions of others. Courtesy is how you display professional conduct. And professionalism is behavior that demonstrates good character and is marked by pride in yourself and your career. So remember that courtesy is professional conduct. Professionalism is your behavior of good character. Empathy is understanding where people are coming from. And command presence is a nonverbal tool. And that is your demeanor and your confidence that's exhibited by your appearance and your posture and your attention to your surroundings. Project a positive self-image in your physical appearance. It is the first nonverbal message you give upon arriving at a scene. So self-image is the first nonverbal message. We move on to verbal and nonverbal cues. Verbal communication, what they say with words during a traffic stop, seems unemotional, but their nonverbal communication seems aggressive. Nonverbal communication is any message or signal sent from one person to another without the explicit use of language. Voice and tone. Verbal communication is not just about what we say, but how we say it. Pay attention to how loud you speak and your tone and inflection. Ask yourself, what are the tone, volume, and pitch of your person's voice? Does my tone of voice indicate sarcasm, confidence, compassion, or anger? And what words are used and how are they spoken? General appearance and dress. Posture, which refers to the way we sit, walk, stand. It includes our bearing, subtle movements, and general presence. Body movement. Body movement often offers vital nonverbal cues. We use our body movement to communicate our attitude or our emotional state by facing or leaning towards a person or through moving away from a person. Facial expressions, touch, smell, personal space, eye contact, mutual gaze, which mutual gaze is the common level of eye-to-eye contact that 2 people are having when conversing. And with eye contact, make sure you know both mutual gaze and break of gaze. Break of gaze usually occurs when a person unintentionally or intentionally drops their gaze from the person looking at them. This can be caused by personality, emotional state, traumatic event, cultural norms, or recalling information. Lesson 3, conflict resolution and de-escalation. Challenges to effective communication. There are some common barriers, verbal and nonverbal, that you should try to avoid when communicating. failing to explain your actions, failing to listen to the person, using slang, jargon, curse words, slurs, being disrespectful, sudden body movement and changes, and so on. This lesson discusses strategies for conflict management that can be tailored to your duties. In particular, you should try to minimize barriers to communication when people have physical or psychological disabilities or conditions. For example, you will need to speak louder for someone who's hard of hearing. A person who has a language difference or accent, environmental and situational distractions. So you can minimize barriers to communication when there's issues with their physical or psychological, accent and language, and environmental and situational distractions. Then you can prevent common barriers to communication with these listed here. Maintaining eye contact, keeping sentences brief and to the point, clear and specific directions, open-ended questions, allowing the person to give their side of the story, and treating everyone with respect. So remember, it's minimizing barriers to communication. With the minimized ones, how you remember those are things that people can't change. So people can't change their language, they can't change their accent. Sometimes you can't change the environment or the situation they're in, and you can't change their physical or psychological disabilities or conditions. So you can only minimize those types of barriers. But the other barriers, you can prevent them from happening. So, like I said, maintaining eye contact, keeping it brief, your sentences brief and clear and concise, open-ended questions, treating everyone with respect. Conflict management. Conflict resolution is a part of managing a conflict and either temporarily or permanently resolving a situation before it escalates. To manage conflict effectively, you should employ active listening, understand human and cultural diversity, and practice self-control. Many situations could potentially escalate to violence if not properly managed. Some examples are domestic disputes, child custody exchanges, landlord-tenant agreements, and civil disputes. Strategies for conflict resolution include separating people involved, rendering first aid, gathering information from all sides, explain what you're doing and what the people involved can also help with, provide options and available resources. If possible, help mediate a compromise. Tell the people involved why you're taking action or not taking action. And act with dignity and leave people with their dignity. Establishing order by guiding the people involved in a dispute towards a peaceful end should be the main goal. However, everyone may not agree with the solution. Sometimes managing conflict requires actions the officer must take to establish control, such as calling additional personnel, redeploying resources, issuing strong verbal commands, or using physical force or the threat of force. These actions, along with others, are commonly referred to as de-escalation techniques and are designed to bring a volatile situation under control so that other techniques, such as mediation and arbitration, can take place. Unfortunately, not all conflicts can be managed to a peaceful conclusion. Community expectations and officer response. Community refers to the people and locations that make up the neighborhoods, institutions, and businesses in the area where you work. Partnerships between law enforcement officers and communities can make the community more secure and protected from criminal elements. You need the public's respect, support, and cooperation to provide effective law enforcement services. To improve your communication with diverse communities, learn the demographics and social characteristics of your community. Demonstrate a sincere willingness to learn about those you serve. Culture may be identified as the customary beliefs, social norms, and significant traits prevalent among a group of people or in a particular place. Intercultural communication takes place when people from different cultures communicate. Intercultural can mean interethnic, interreligious, interregional, as well as between genders. You can improve your intercultural communication by being culturally responsive. So remember, in order to improve your intercultural communication, you must be culturally responsive. When you are culturally responsive, you are open to learning about new cultures, respectful of cultural differences, and recognize the important role cultures play in people's lives. You can work on being culturally responsive by 1. Learning about your community, including the faith organizations, the languages, the cultures, the small businesses, the diversity. 2. Demonstrating respect for the cultures of your community members. 3. Being open to learning and fixing mistakes when they happen. And 4. Remembering that not everyone has the same experience as you do. Preparing for an interaction. Self-talk is the practice of talking to yourself as you anticipate, encounter, or evaluate an event. If If people do what you ask and put out their cigarette, that behavior matters more than what they were saying to you. So this underlined section means that you don't necessarily need to go overboard. You need to focus on what their behavior is and changing that behavior. And if that happens, then whatever their reaction is, doesn't matter what their reaction is, as long as they change the behavior that you want them to change. So now we're going to move on to core competencies. You have introduction, appropriate questions, active listening, self-de-escalation, nonverbal communication, environment and audience consideration, implicit bias, self-awareness, procedural justice, and appropriate conclusions. So there are 10 core competencies while performing your duties. So introduction, the simple act of introducing yourself to a person and explaining the reason why your interaction may make the person feel more at ease. Appropriate questions, asking the right questions can also make the communication process smoother. Active listening skills are critical for law enforcement officers. Active listening involves paraphrasing and restating, summarizing or repeating, clarifying or asking the person to explain, reflecting by stating information, and ensuring that you allow adequate time for the person to both comprehend what you said and be able to respond to you. I know active listening was a big one on this test. Active listening involves focusing more on listening than on talking. Listen so you can gather important information. Then we move on to self-de-escalation. Self-control also includes your ability to detach from your personal feelings regardless of how stressful the situation may be. Breathe smoothly, deeply, and evenly. Be aware of things that irritate you. Exercise self-control over your reactions. Keep a professional attitude. Maintain an impartial outlook. Precisely execute your duties to help retain your self-control. Knowing and overcoming your weaknesses will help you gain self-control. When an officer loses self-control, a situation can quickly worsen and can have a negative result. Your goal is to have a positive result. Then we move on to nonverbal communication. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Understanding the subtle differences between a person's spoken words and the nonverbal communication will improve your ability to communicate effectively. Then you have environment and audience consideration. So this is just about how loud it is, being culturally sensitive, being empathetic, getting an interpreter, simple things like that. People that have like hearing impairments and making adjustments for people. Then you have implicit bias as number 7. Remembering that we all have implicit biases will help you in your interactions with the public. Always take a moment to assess what implicit biases might influence your actions in any given situation. Then you have self-awareness. Being aware of your own thoughts and behaviors can help you control yourself in a difficult situation. Self-awareness ties into your overall emotional intelligence. So I know there was a lot of confusion on that test with the difference between self-de-escalation and self-awareness. So self-de-escalation has to do with self-control and the ability to detach yourself from your personal feelings, where self-awareness is being aware of your own thoughts and behaviors and being able to control yourself in that type of situation. And then self-awareness has to do with your emotional intelligence. As you improve your emotional intelligence, you become aware of how you might react in a variety of situations. This helps with your overall safety because you will know how to prepare for the different situations you will encounter. So again, self-de-escalation is emotional and self-awareness is your thoughts and behaviors. Then we have procedural justice, which is kind of like the lead framework, where you're explaining your actions, giving the person a chance to speak, you're treating everyone with respect, and you're remaining transparent in your actions. And then the appropriate conclusion. At the end of any interaction with a person, whether law enforcement action is taken or not, conclude by explaining what action will be taken or not taken and why. As explained earlier, leave the person with their dignity and treat them with respect. And that concludes Chapter 2. And just remember that the biggest things we got here are those 10 core competencies and what falls in what. I'm going to quickly breeze through them. So introduction, appropriate questions, active listening, which is listening more than talking, self-de-escalation, which is your emotional state, ability to detach from your personal feelings, nonverbal communication, environment and audience consideration, implicit bias, self-awareness, which is being aware of your thoughts and behaviors, which ties into emotional intelligence, procedural justice, like the lead framework, and the appropriate conclusion. And that's Chapter 2.